guys, I wanted to jump on here real quick and just do a hopefully quick video on how I bring my digital images into my Silhouette software to prepare them for printing and cutting. So let's jump right into it. This video is going to be basically taught with the expectation that you have some knowledge of your Silhouette Studio software. There are going to be some things that I do that might seem a little advanced, and I apologize if it doesn't make sense. I'm happy to do any kind of a tutorial on basics, but again, this is going to be from the standpoint of you've had your software for a while and you kind of know how to use it and how to trace images and whatnot. You'll see me walk through the steps, so feel free to pause the video at any time to mimic those steps. But I'm not going to go into super basics of it. So my printer only prints 8.5 by 11, so that is the page size that I am working with here. You can change your page size in your page setup panel, but I just keep it when I'm doing my print and cuts to 8.5 by 11 because that's all my printer will print. And I will post in the description box what kind of printer I use and paper and all of that good stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my registration marks. So I'm going to go to my view, and then I'm going to go down to registration marks, and I'm going to click on that. The hotkeys for that, if you have a PC, are Control F3. I'm assuming it's probably Apple F3 if you have a Mac. So this is going to bring your registration mark box up. Oops, let me move that where it's supposed to be, and down here. And by default, it's going to say the style is off. You are going to turn it on based on the type of silhouette that you have. I have the cameo, so I'm going to go to type 1. I have mine preset to where my length is 0.625, my thickness is 0.50, and my inset is 0.625. This is what works for me. You can mess with that, and I'm not going to get into the details of what all those settings do, but this is what I have found works for me. If you want to play with it, you can, and you can see what works for you. So that is the most important thing. Your registration marks tell your cameo where to start reading so that it knows where to cut. So all of your images are going to be placed in this white space once you are ready to print and cut. This red line is your cut border, and this gray line is by default your print border. My printer is laser, so I can't do edge-to-edge printing on my printer, so it leaves 1/8 of an inch around the entire perimeter of a page. So that's why mine's kind of showing like that. But basically what you want to do is put all of your images, and I'll show you as we go along. So the next thing I do to get my images into this page, I do not go to File and Open. The reason I don't do that is if I open up every image individually, it's going to open it up as a new document, and then I have to go back and forth between my documents and pull them into one document. That is just a waste of time to me. So I have my I'm working with the Maggie Holmes Bloom digital set, which I think is still on sale at AC Digitals for like 10 bucks. There's a ton of images and a ton of papers. So I'm working with the Elements 3 pack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab a handful of images, and I'm going to left click and drag them over here into my studio. That's it. We'll do 4 images, okay? So you'll notice I'm dragging them over to my gray space on the left, not my white space. The reason I'm doing that, and it's completely up to you, is because if I drag this image onto my white space, do you see over here how there's a little white border around this little spool image? I can't see that when it's over here. And when I cut my files, I want them to look like they are meant to look. So if you were doing like a digital layout or something with this, you would see that white border. Well, when all is said and done and my images are printed, I want that white border to actually be part of the image. So I keep everything when I trace it over here on this gray side. Okay, so first thing you want to do is trace your images. like I said, I do it all on gray. Sometimes I go over here and do it if I'm running out of space, but we're just working with 4 images right now. So I'm just going to leave them over here. So I'm going to either go into my panels and open my trace box by clicking here, right here where it says trace, or I'm going to go over to the right and I'm going to find this little butterfly image. If you hover over these images in this panel over here to the right, it tells you what each one does. So if you hover over the one that looks kind of like a butterfly, it says open the trace panel, then that is going to be opened. And I don't know why they're opening on top of each other. It normally never does that. Alright, so, okay. So I've got my trace panel open. So I'm going to select the images that I want to trace. I prefer to do one image at a time. If they're fairly simple images, you can select everything and trace it, but that just gets complicated. So select your trace area, and then you're going to click somewhere outside of the image, hold down your left mouse key, and drag this gray box over the image you want to trace. This is where you're going to mess with your threshold. I bump mine all the way up to 100, so this whole thing is yellowed out. And then I'm going to hit trace, and as you can see, I have a pretty perfect trace around the border of this image. I want this image and the cut line to stay intact, so oops, I'm going to select both of them just by clicking and dragging my mouse. So you can hit like one image, hold your shift key down, and then grab the trace line too, but I just find it easier to right click or left click over here, drag your arrow over, and it selects both images, and I'm going to group them together. You can right click and go down to group, or your hotkeys on a PC are Control G or Apple G will group that together. So now when I click just once, it grabs the whole thing and moves it around. And then I'm going to bring it over to my white space. Do the same thing with this image. I'm going to select it. I like to leave a little bit of a border around the image, like a little bit of space. And then bring up my threshold and trace. Group them together and bring it over here. Once you get the hang of it, it goes pretty quick. It can be time consuming if you're working with a ton of files, so just keep that in mind. But once you're done, if you save your file, you're done. You don't ever have to do this part of it again. You can just go in to your library, pull up the file that you want to reprint and recut, and it's done. Okay, so now we're going to do this rabbit. Okay, the funny thing about this rabbit, when you're working with a lot of white space in an image, your software doesn't really do a good job of tracing or of filling in. So I brought up my threshold all the way to 100%, and you can see over here there's little specks. If I were to hit just the trace button, it's going to trace all those little specks, and then you have a ton of cleanup to do. I don't have time for that. If you want to, that's fine, you can. But instead of hitting trace, I'm going to hit trace outer edge, and that way all I'm going to get is the outline of the bunny. Right? So you get a pretty perfect trace. Again, I want to group these together and move them onto my white space. Okay, here's an image that I know because I've tried to record this video 72 times. And so this image is an image where when you go to trace it, it's not going to be as simple as just bumping up your threshold to 100% and tracing it. The lighter the images are, like I said, the harder of a time the software has of reading what it's trying to fill in. I have had my silhouette for years. I still don't understand the high pass filter and the scale and this and the despeckle and all that. I don't really know what all that is, and I don't really care at this point. I'm sure at some point maybe I'll need it, but I haven't in years. So here's what I'm talking about. If I go to select this image and trace it, and I bump up my threshold all the way, you can see, I'll zoom in, you can see that it didn't outline the entire white area, and then it gave me, it kind of traced the threads. And if I were to trace that, this is what you're left with. Some jaggedy lines And that's really not the look I'm going for. If that's the way you want to trace it and cut it, that's fine, that's up to you, but that's not how I want it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take this image, I'm going to just close my selected trace area, and I'm going to select this image and I'm going to copy it, Control C or Apple C, Control V or Apple V. And I'm going to paste. I'm going to have an exact duplicate of this image. This is where I'm going to mess with the colors, and you'll see why I'm duplicating the image. So I'm going to select it, make sure that this one of the two images is selected. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go over here to my image effects panel, and I'm going to open that. And I'm going to drag this over here so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to click on the, is this invert? I think it's invert. Invert. I'm going to click invert, and then I'm going to mess with my inversion until this is kind of a darker gray. I don't care about what's in the middle. What I'm looking for is that the entire white portion, the outline of this, is like a darker color. And then I'm going to hit apply. At this point, you can close your effects panel, and then you're going to select your trace area again. I'm only going to trace the spool. I'm not going to trace that gray box around it. And then if I bump up my threshold all the way, it gives me a really clean fill-in. And then I'm going to trace it, and then I'm going to click on just the image. You can move it or just delete it. Then I'm going to put this somewhere around there. Doesn't even have to, I'm not going to sit here and try and line it up perfectly. You don't have to do that. Most software is pretty intuitive, so you can put it anywhere as long as it's kind of touching. Select both of the images, so your cut line and your image, and you're going to go to your transform panel, which is right here, and you're going to click that little center button, and it's going to perfectly line up your image with your cut line. You can close that out. And then I grab both of those again, and I group them, and I drag them over here to my page. Now, I'm going to go into a different file that I already created. This one. So I've done a few more images on this one, and I'm going to show you where you need to place your images. So you want to keep your images while your registration marks are on within this white space, this internal white space. You don't want to go outside the red line, and you don't want to creep into these gray marks. You want to keep it touching all white, and it doesn't, see how this image to the left side goes past these gray lines? That's okay as long as it's not doing that. We don't want it to touch the gray lines as long as it's in your white space. This is where, once you're done tracing all your images, you just want to play with it and manipulate your images to get as much on one page as you possibly can. Obviously, I could add quite a few more images in here, but for time's sake, we're just going to go to one that I've already done. And I had this problem when I tried to record the video last time. We're going to open. Okay, here we go. So you can see I have all of my images in the white space. Some extend beyond this gray, but not into the gray. And from here, all you're going to do is go up to File, and you're going to print. I'm not going to, my printer's not on, so it won't. So you're going to hit print, and you're going to wait for it to print, at which point you will then put this onto your cutting mat, stick it into your silhouette that is on. You're going to hit send. If the silhouette gods are on your side and your lighting is good and you've done everything right, your silhouette's going to read your registration marks, and it's going to start cutting, and in less than a couple minutes you're going to have all this fussy cutting done for you. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please leave them below. I know this is probably not the best quality video. I'm not a video maker. I keep saying that, and then I keep making videos. Funny how that works. But if you have any questions, leave them below. If you would like to see a more basic tutorial on using your silhouette, I'm happy to do that for you. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love teaching. I love sharing my knowledge. I've been crafting for many, 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 many years. So I love to share any knowledge that I have with you guys. So like I said, any questions, leave them below, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.